How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Wednesday, July 17th. Training camp is very much well underway. The Houston Texans became the first team to have their entire team report to training camp, so more teams will follow suit in the remainder of this week and next week as well. So exciting times are coming. Football is coming just around the corner, but on today's episode, we're not going to talk about training camp. We're going to talk about a lot about the AFC East and some topics surrounding those teams in that division. Starting off with some more talk about the Davante Adams potential trade to the New York Jets. I talked about it on Monday, but now Boomer Esiason, an NFL analyst, had some pretty interesting things to say about that topic, so I'm going to comment on that. Then also some more on the running back market. Saquon Barkley talked about the longevity and just the situation right now for all the running backs in the NFL, currently where it stands. And offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, Joe Brady, is trying to get Josh Allen to not be so much of Superman, but just trying to do things more routinely to keep him safe and to benefit the entire offense overall. Those topics and much more coming up on today's show. Before I start with the Davante Adams trade talks, I wanted to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments, to use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net. By using that link that you see on your screen, I'm able to see your comment on my chat box or read it on air, and that way get your guys' thoughts on anything I say. It's a big help for this show and the network, so if you guys would, we'd greatly appreciate it if you'd use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, with any of your questions or comments on today's show. With that being said, though, we're going to jump right into the trade talks because I initially brought up this topic on Monday when I heard Breece Hall talk about it, Garrett Wilson talk about it, Aaron Rodgers even brought it up, and even today when I was scrolling through Instagram, I saw a report on one of the accounts that I follow that said Davante Adams made a statement that he wanted to make it clear if there was ever a chance that he'd want to reunite with anybody in the NFL, it would be Aaron Rodgers. But with that being said, his agent came out and sort of downplayed all the rumors that a trade is going to happen, that it is likely to happen. His agent is saying no. Davante Adams didn't say no. He did say, if it were to happen, it would be with Aaron. So I don't know. He's keeping the door open. But Boomer Esiason, I wanted to talk about him because he followed up the comments made by Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson with some of the things that he's hearing from his sources close to the New York Jets. If you're unfamiliar with Boomer Esiason, he was actually a former quarterback for the New York Jets and an NFL analyst nowadays, but he recently spoke on the WFAN morning show about the potential Davante Adams trade to the New York Jets, and he said some pretty interesting things that I have up on the screen for you guys to follow along with. He said, I'm hearing that this is going to happen. If it does happen somewhere in late August, early September, I'm not sure about why it would take that long. And this is after, obviously, all those comments that I mentioned before, and even Davante Adams was first brought up this idea on the Up and Adams show, and he said that Aaron Rodgers was actually in his ear about it, about trying to reunite and get back together, because it seems like obviously Aaron would love that. Breece Hall would love that. Garrett Wilson obviously seems to also want to be part of that. But Davante Adams said that that is happening, that Aaron Rodgers is talking in his ear about it. But for right now, he didn't really say that anything's in the works or anything like that. He said he was focused on the Las Vegas Raiders. And it makes the most sense just because right now he is on the third year, or he's going to be entering the third year of that big 5-year, $141 million deal that he got only in 2022. So very much early in this process of trying to get himself out of that contract or just switching that contract over to the New York Jets, especially because of what the Raiders had to give up, but also I think Davante is obviously one of the cornerstones of this project that the Raiders are building right now. Having that established superstar is something that a lot of teams that are trying to rebuild can say that they have on their roster. So with having him, it definitely helps out a lot with the development maybe of Aiden O'Connell, taking the pressure off of some of the younger guys, and just getting some sort of life in that offense when you know you have a Hall of Famer, an established wide receiver, a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL on your team. But on the flip side of that, you could say that the Raiders are really not going anywhere right now with Davante. They're not really competing for playoff games, playoff spots, or anything like that without a quarterback, honestly. So on the flip side, you could say they might as well trade him right now while his value is still high. By doing that, they'll get more assets in the future, and then you could maybe draft a quarterback or go out and use it on a trade to acquire somebody else. In free agency next year, you free up some salary cap space. There are some benefits with either side of it, obviously keeping Davante and trading him, but I still find it a little doubtful just based on it almost seems like it's coming out of nowhere. I know probably this has been in the works, maybe for Aaron Rodgers, thinking that he would love this, but only recently now that we're heading into training camp in such a crucial period where the Raiders are building their offense obviously around Davante and they have this whole plan installed with him to then trade him away. One, it would cost a lot, and I don't know if the Jets can really afford to give up so much right now because it seems like they're on the brink already of having their roster, their main group of guys, and just making sure that this group carries them into the next 2 to 3 years. I'm not sure they have the capital to present to the Las Vegas Raiders to get them to trade away their best player on their team, but that's how I'm feeling initially on these talks. But Boomer Esiason continued on with that with some more statements, but before that he said that through his connections to the New York Jets, back when, if you remember, when Aaron Rodgers was first linked to the New York Jets, Boomer Esiason was one of the guys that really talked it up, was one of the voices in media that was really believing that it could happen. He brought all the facts, he brought what he was hearing from his sources, and it obviously ended up coming true. So if you're unfamiliar with Boomer Esiason, why would we trust him? Who is he? He has been close to the New York Jets previously, and I don't want to say predicted that Aaron Rodgers would be there, but he was a main believer in the fact that Aaron Rodgers would come. And initially, right from the start, he mentioned, reading in an article, that Aaron played against the New York Jets when he was still with the Packers. He very much liked what they were building over there, and he was one of the main and first people to bring up that idea that Aaron, somewhere in the near future, could be enticed by the New York Jets to potentially play on their team. Obviously, that ended up happening, so he does hold a little bit of credibility there, at least from me reading that, seeing how correct he was in the past. So I am taking it with a grain of salt with what he's saying, because to me, in just my mind, it doesn't make too much sense for me. I find it really hard for it to become true. But he continued on with some more statements about the Davante Adams trade, and he said, Davante is never going to come out publicly and say, I want to leave the Raiders, but you do hear in this wide receiver program on Netflix, if you guys haven't checked it out yet, where he does this, I got to get out of here before I get killed. He says that leads the viewer to believe that he wants out of Vegas, but I don't see him saying that publicly. And after that statement, he said, he added on that he could see it as a more of the behind-the-scenes thing. Maybe Davante Adams just mentioning it, hinting it to his agent, his displeasure with the Raiders currently. We've obviously all seen the frustrations. You don't have to have seen the Netflix series Receiver to know how frustrating of a season it was last year for Davante. You could have seen it in any Raiders game last year, most of them, when Jimmy Garoppolo was there, Aiden O'Connell, during the time with Josh McDaniels there as well. It was all really just a disaster in terms of standards from where Davante was used to, obviously playing with Aaron, to where he was with Las Vegas. It was very much a bad period for him. But on top of that, again, if it was just up to Davante, I think he would probably end up just being traded. If this was the NBA or something, and you could just say, I want to be traded, and it facilitated the whole process, then we could probably get into an area where, all right, what are the next steps to this happening? But in the NFL, you see it with Brandon Ayuk now that he's requested a trade. The 49ers aren't budging. They're not blinking about it at all. If he wants to get traded, it doesn't matter. They'll keep him. They want to keep him, and they could just not entertain anything because that's not how it works in the NFL. So the Raiders pretty much hold the cards here because he is just at the beginning of that contract. But again, it just seems unlikely to me hearing about it now. I have to see something really play out in training camp, like an outburst from Davante or just continual bad body language or something like that. Just voicing his displeasure for me to actually believe this could happen, because until I see it from Davante, I can't really put too much stock in it. That's just me. But of course, you could see how the New York Jets sources, people that are close to the Jets, could be optimistic about it, and they could end up being true, or being right, I should say. But right now, I think it's in a gray area where we're hearing a lot of things and we're not seeing too much being played out. With training camp just coming just around the corner, like I mentioned to start the show, it would be a bad time, I think, for the Raiders to right away cut ties with this season. If you're trading Davante, you're clearly planning for the future. This season is almost out the window, and that doesn't really paint a good picture for the NFL if this team is just going to basically tank this year and just not really be taken seriously. So that's another thing that has to be considered in this trade for it to actually happen. And right away, if he was on the Jets, on paper, that team would be stacked from an offensive standpoint. But again, I still have my doubts around a lot of these all-star, unbelievable teams that are just insane on paper. But then once you get to the field to actually playing football, and I think football is the one sport where you could really see that it just isn't about having 3 all-star wide receivers, a great running back. That offensive line really is the biggest doubt for me, and that probably is the biggest determinant in the success of everything. If they protect Aaron, or if Aaron is constantly running around back there trying to fend for his life, it's not going to look good if Aaron can't throw to Davante, Garrett, or Mike Williams. So there's a lot of things that have to just happen. If this does happen, it doesn't really move the needle for me that much either. So I think the Jets, for me, have to prioritize other things before we talk about Davante, but this was always going to be a topic. Aaron clearly wants to play with Davante again, so if he pushes hard enough and this starts to gain a little traction, like I said, if I see some action getting done, maybe I'll start to believe it. But right now, I'm probably at a 6 out of 10 that I think that this could happen. But I want to know what you guys think. Leave your guys' thoughts. Will Davante be traded before the season starts? Are the Jets Super Bowl contenders if Davante goes over there? Let me know what you guys think in the live chat box or afterwards in the comment section. But that is the first segment. That'll wrap it up for the first segment. And we're going to go to our first break of the show. But when we return, we're going to talk about Saquon Barkley, mentioning the running back market right now, the whole narrative around running backs and their longevity in the game. He calls out some of the narratives around that, and he gives his input, as well as me giving my input on what he said around that topic. So stay tuned. We're going to come back to that topic when we return on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.